on the International Business Growth Radio Network. I'm your host, Jason Wally Waldron. Folks, I am joined here today by Chris Felton. And before we dive back into some amazing stories of how he essentially went from broke and divorced to a very successful financial services entrepreneur, I want to remind you that you can always go to exitology.com, click on Contact Us, shoot us a question, and we will answer it in an upcoming episode. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Excited to keep moving.
Awesome. So, in our first segment, you shared a lot of your history and kind of where you came from and things like that. And there were a couple things that really stood out to me. And one was you talked about how delusion and optimism are strange bedfellows. They live in the same bed. And I'm thinking you're probably going to want to tell us a little bit more about that. And the other thing that I thought was really, really interesting was, you were talking about I was being coached, but I wasn't seeing results and I wasn't tracking the results and I was digging myself in this hole and just all these kind of things. And it ultimately landed with until you became very clear on what you wanted out of life and you were had a certainty around this alignment and your expectations and what you were really intending to do, everything kind of was surfaced. So, kind of with that, maybe take us in a few levels deep into, money beliefs and success beliefs and just delusion and optimism. I mean, take us away here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the concept. It's the number one concept for a high performer, a world-class thinker is what's called objective reality, okay. And it's the ability to own your results without getting emotional about it.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we as humans don't like to feel bad about ourselves. Right. And so for me, it's easier to be optimistic and be delusional about my financial results, right, than to actually own them and do something about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
Or, just certain mind viruses I had, subtle. One day I'll get there. One day it'll happen. I've interviewed, I had a very successful guy in my office, 7-figure earner, but he was broke. And his wife brought him in and, his ego's not your amigo, right? And he was just kind of in resistance. And he's like, I don't see how you can help me. And, he's only a tax guy and all that. And we found his virus, I'll just make more.
Right.
And
so that's really interesting. Yeah. You talked about kind of, this like one day it'll come instead of actually bringing it forth. And you also talked about, mind virus. What does amigo is not your ego? What does that mean?
Ego's not your amigo.
Oh,
right?
Ego. Yeah. What does that mean?
Ego's not your amigo. Well, your ego is addicted to keeping you right where you are, addicted to keeping you comfortable.
Okay.
Right. And one of my first quotes in my book is a life spent seeking comfort results in an entirely uncomfortable existence.
Totally.
Right.
Yep.
And so, and back to that guy, like, I'll just make more. It'll happen one day. And so what happens around money and a lot of entrepreneurs is most people have a pretty bad relationship with money.
Okay.
And, we live in the richest country on the planet and 96% of Americans are broke.
That's insane.
And why is that? Well, I mean, because if you Google the word money, you're going to find a lot of information.
Okay.
Right? How could a CPA and a financial advisor be that upside down? Right. I know what to do. I know what to tell. I know how to tell people what to do. Just like this guy made 7 figures and was broke. He knew how to make money. But there's a belief system, and it's an author named Margaret Lynch wrote a book called Tapping into Wealth, and she says the biggest determining factor of your financial success is the vows that you made to gain acceptance to your family at a young age. The vows that you made to gain the acceptance of your family at a young age, meaning we buy their stuff to get their approval. And so what happens is that those early years around money, around everything. Friendly, the world's friendly. It's not friendly.
Okay. Yeah.
Money's good, money's bad. People are good, people are bad. Just this programming, and I won't go all the way, down the rabbit hole on this, but
Right.
But by the time we're age 4, we're 50% hardwired programmed on these things.
Right. Well, yeah, you're really touching on a lot of interesting things here. And whether you call it success patterns, failure patterns, root patterns, psychological patterns, there's, the brain loses most of its plasticity by the age of 25, right? It becomes very, very hard to to get more positive patterns, I guess is what I'm trying to say here, if that's what you desire in your life. And so I think what you're speaking of, though, is super, super important, because if we look out there and we know that there, 96% of people out there are running around broke, first of all, that bothers me. I know it bothers you. That's why we're having this discussion here today, because it doesn't have to be so. Just straight up, right? It's a choice that's made, I think, is what is really part of what you're sharing there. And one thing that we continually share with our clients and the listeners of the show is, remember how much agency you as an individual have to choose how your life goes. And I think that's what you're really diving at, because whatever that root pattern is, if it can be identified, I think, to your point, right, and become objective about it, and you get that separation, now we can do something about it. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah. And it's, and it's just, it's the programming we get, growing up around money, right? I mean, just, it's the media and movies and all that. And so what I'm saying is, most multimillionaires and successful people, very few of them grow up in this environment,
right,
where money's great, it's okay to have it, it's all these things.
Yep.
And the studies show, and my friends have done the studies, including Steve Siebold, it's at some point, the person that becomes wealthy actually calls BS on the belief system, and actually sits down and does the work to identify the symptom was broke for me, the root, because I couldn't work any harder, right? Because that was my answer. And my coach is like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm working 80, 90 hours a week. He's like, you must be stupid. Like, what does it take you 80 to 90 hours a week to do? And it was, yeah, he was so phenomenal.
That's awesome.
He knew when to hug and knew when to kick. And we'll talk at the end how he really kicked me, that served me. But I said, well, he's like, all right, dude, get a journal, green journal. It's your money journal. I want you to sit down. I want you to write the word money down, and I want you to write down everything you make up about that word.
Wow.
So, Wally, it was about me, for the first time in my life, actually sitting down and going, what do I make up about this? I mean, I just got done doing some training for a sales organization. They're wanting to know how to do things. And I'm like, when I say the word sell or sales, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Every single one in that room, it was a negative thought.
Oh, man.
Versus serving, versus helping, versus, they're looking for, I told them, what's more important, the golf swing or the golf club? It's the golf swing.
Of course, right?
So in my industry, financial services, or in the money industry, there's tons of golf clubs.
Right.
But if your swing sucks, as mine did, you need to work on the swing. So I wrote the word money down, and it's in my book. I mean, I disclosed my list. It's, hard to make, hard to keep. My dad told me rich people are crooks. They make money on the backs of poor people. My mom was like, money, either have it or you don't. Can't take it with you. Won't make you happy. And so I made this list, and I'm like, oh, I finally met the enemy. It is I. And and then, but the empowering thing was, what do I really want? What do I want my new story to be?
Right.
And what's the work I'm going to do? And I'm like, okay, so money. It's a scorecard of value that I'm creating for other people. If I'm growing personally, then my money's growing. Right. So anyway, I just started telling a more empowering story,
Right.
and I quit feeding the old BS story.
Well, I'm loving this, and I kind of let you just go into that and share that entire process with everyone because, I think we all have one of these bugaboos, whether we know it or not, right? And so I thought it was interesting, the 7-figure earner who is still broke. Oh, well, one day I'll get there, right? Because I'll just sell more, right? So what do we know about that person? He's super anchored into selling more, right? But not actually, not keeping anything, for instance, right? And in the example you were using there is, you had, those were some really intense negative programmings that you received in your own household. And so, I think it's very impactful that you shared, hey, here's how it was identified first and then moved beyond. And so let's go back to that scorecard real quick. I like that alignment and that idea because we're all entrepreneurs here. And so money has now changed for you personally, and also your life has changed as you've gone along this, because as you personally expand and become a better you who can serve more people, then you see that showing up in the scorecard called money. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about, increasing value, right?
Right. Yep.
But it's also, like the guy that said, hey, I'll just make more.
Right.
He doesn't have healthy respect for the money he's got. I mean, we could do a whole
Right.
episode on respect of money.
Yep.
I had zero of it. I'm like, oh, it's just $5. It's just $10. But anyway, yeah.
All right. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of bucket this up here and sort of map this to some of the work we do in the business world too, because the way that we help businesses to grow and then maximize their value and ultimately unlock that value for the business owner is by tracking what we call the transferable value metric. And I want everybody listening here to hear how this is exactly the same thing, because as we invite you to be a better leader in your organization, you're going to see that metric change in a positive manner. And it's exactly the same thing that Chris was talking about on the personal finance front. And so Chris, it's chrisfelton.me, and they can find out about your book, Think and Grow You. And we'll be back in about 2 minutes here on the Xtology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show here on the International Business Growth Radio Network.